Hello and welcome to the Motoring News Zone, the show where we take you through the biggest stories in the world of cars right now. This week we go over how the UK's road names were decided, we ask whether the UK's car industry is in trouble, and we reveal which are the UK's favourite motorways to drive home to Christmas on. All that and a whole lot more is coming up in today's show. Let's dive in. Here on the Motoring Chronicle, we love going through some of the most popular questions that you guys are asking now when it comes to road networks in the UK. And something that I've seen pop up recently is who decided the names of roads in the UK? Now, this is a very big question to answer. After all, the UK's road network in truth predates the UK, predates even England as an idea, really, because even if you go back 2,000 years to the times of the Romans, when they first came to what is now England, they actually said that a lot of the roads that they built during their time, they were either based on top of or just inspired really by older routes that were already there when they got to the UK like 2,000 years ago. So there's a lot to cover when it comes to this, but I'll start by quickly just going over what the actual process is for naming roads in the UK, what the term is for this, and it's actually odominy. And that basically sets the street or road naming conventions in the UK. Now, when it comes to local streets in towns, they're very matter of fact. And what I mean by that is that there are some very kind of standards that you really see in most places in the UK. For example, the main trade place for a town or a city is known as the High Street or the Main Street or something like that, because that's back in the day where most of the kind of foot traffic and everything went through, so it was known as the Main Street or the High Street because it got a high number of people being there. And from there, most of the roads will be known just as roads. Roads and streets are effectively the same thing, but they're just called something different. It's just another word for actually putting at the end of something, and these are known as suffixes. And when it comes to this, there's all kinds of different ones: way, lane, hill, row, alley. It all depends on just what kind of terrain it's on and what is there. For example, Bank Street, if you've got a Bank Street in your actual town or city, then at some point, if indeed it still actually is, you would have had a bank on there at some point. That's basically what it is, very matter of fact. And it does lead to actually some funny names in the UK. There's a lot of, I won't share it because obviously it's got some rude language on it, but there are some places and some roads and streets in the UK that have very funny names, and they've not really stood the test of time in terms of practicality. For example, But Close is actually quite close to where I live, which is just makes it kind of a funny name at the end of the day. There's a lot worse ones than that. Just, oh yeah, if you want to go look them up, be my guest, but I'm not going to repeat them on this video because I don't want to get it demonetized at the end of the day. There is a bit of an anomaly really when it comes to naming streets in the UK, and that is the City of London. Now, for those that don't know, there are two Londons in a sense, or one London, but one place that's technically not called London that everybody calls London. So the City of London is actually somewhere right in the centre of what is commonly known as London. Most of what people know as London, Greater London, is actually called the City of Westminster. The City of London is effectively enveloped by that. The City of London is somewhere right in the centre of London. You'll know it when you go there because it's got different road signs and things like that. It's pretty obvious you're in somewhere else that is not quite like the rest of London. But interestingly, there are no roads there in the literal sense. There's nowhere that's actually called roads, just because of tradition, basically, aside from Goswell Road. Now, that actually goes through the City of London today. It didn't historically. It has done for the last 30 years or so, since 1994. So there is an exception to that rule now, but most of them are just basically just one word. For example, Cheapside or something like that. There's no Cheapside Road or Cheapside Lane. It's just Cheapside. So interesting for sure with stuff like that. And again, just one that off the top of my head, the Shambles in places like York. I'm pretty sure that is actually the road that passes through there. It's not known as Shambles Way or Shambles Lane, I don't think. It's just the Shambles. But yeah, so that's what it is on a local level. It's just a matter of fact kind of explanation for what is there or what was there. That's what it was named as. But bringing things into the modern era where people travel between cities and towns all the time, A roads and B roads. Now, I've gone into detail about A roads and B roads and how they work, and I'll put the image on the screen up there for you guys, just like I did in the previous video. So this is for Great Britain. So England, Wales, and Scotland. We'll get on to Northern Ireland eventually. They're a little different to everybody else when it comes to this, because they're not on what is kind of mainland Britain, if you will. It's on the island of Ireland. It's different, even though the Great Britain isn't technically a mainland. It's not on mainland Europe. But anyway, basically the numbers that you can see on that diagram there, they refer to the different corridors when it comes to motorways and A roads. So for example, that blue section on the eastern part of England, that is the M1 corridor. Every road pretty much that you will see in there that's an either an M, A or B road will all start with a 1. So the M1 is there, the A1 is there. If there's an A101, it should all be there. Now, a lot of these routes are based off of previous routes that have been around for a long time. A lot of the motorways were basically either based upon or built upon previous A roads when those were being starting to be built in the 1960s. I've gone more in depth in another video about that if you want to go check it out. But in terms of the actual convention for these, that's how that works. Now, there are exceptions to this. There are some roads within this that actually have numbers that don't associate to the corridor they're in, but there's not too many of those. And you'll also see maybe some roads as well that actually have duplicate numbers. And what I mean by that is that some of the numbers are actually used twice in certain places. So for example, the Leicester Ring Road in the Midlands has the same designation as a road in Cumbria in the far northwest of England. They're both known as the A594, for example. So again, there are exceptions to this, but in general, that is what it is. The number and actual letter, it actually is only used for one road, and if they are used twice, they are unconnected, they are far away, but again, it's rare that happens. But who actually decides upon these names? What if someone decides to actually make a new road in the UK, for example, maybe an M7 up in Scotland, which is where it would have to be? That's another video in itself that I've done before. Why is there no M7 in the UK? Well, for example, with this one, if it's in Scotland, then this would be decided by the Scottish Office, or as it's known nowadays, the Scottish Government, basically, the Department for Transportation. Within that, they would decide the road designation for that. England and Wales, they use the Department for Transportation, which is based down in London. They would decide upon the road name for something that's on a national level, such as a motorway, an A road, or a B road. On a more local level, though, it's slightly different. With that, it's basically city, borough, or district councils, whoever is actually responsible, that would name those roads. So, for example, where I live in Huddersfield, it would probably be something like Kirklees Council that would decide upon the name of the road, just to make sure it doesn't clash with anywhere else in the area that it is. You'll find plenty of roads that have duplicate names in the UK, but they won't usually be in the same area unless they are something very common like a high street or something like that. They will generally try and avoid using the same name more than once when possible. But there is one elephant in the room. Like I said, there is Northern Ireland, which is a little different to everything else. And it's not something that I've really covered. And you're probably wondering, well, how do the roads actually get named here? What are they actually called? Well, similar to the rest of the UK, they do use a similar actual naming scheme. So for motorways, they are known as M's. So there is an M1 in Northern Ireland that runs between Belfast and Dungannon. But it's nothing to do with the M1 in the UK that runs from near London up to, I think it's north of York, where it actually becomes the A1 again. I forget the area where it is anyway, in the north of England. That's the important thing for that. And when it comes to an explanation for how it works, is there a zonal system? No. Is there an explanation for how these numbers are actually allocated? No, it's just basically whatever they want. It's anarchy, guys. They call them whatever they want. There's no M4 in Northern Ireland for whatever reason, but there is an M5. Just little things like that. It's rather strange to say the least, but it's whatever they want it to be at the end of the day. And when it comes to who decides upon the name for these roads, it is the Department for Infrastructure Roads, or the DFI roads, which basically it's basically the Department for Transportation, but in Northern Ireland. When it comes to more local routes, of course, it's similar to the rest of the UK. Again, local councils or whatever, or borough councils, they will decide upon the names for these roads. But when it comes to A roads, M roads, and B roads, and even there are actually C roads. I mean, there's C roads in the rest of the UK as well, but there are C roads too in Northern Ireland when it comes to that. So yeah, there we go. Something else, the last thing I'm going to mention, because it's been a long video, I know. Europe has something called the E-route system, the European road system, and some routes in the UK actually are a part of the E-road system that is used in the rest of Europe. Again, it's instead of being nationalized kind of road numbers and stuff, that's for the entirety of Europe. Now you're probably wondering, E-roads, I've never heard of those before. Well, you probably won't have done because there's no signage in the UK to indicate that, I don't know, for example, I don't know what the numbers are, but let's just say the M1 in the UK is actually like the E9 or whatever. There's no signage for that. A, because it's confusing. B, because we're not really that enthused with it, really. I mean, you can see it on some maps, of course, but when it comes to practicality, these E numbers for roads that are part of the European system isn't really a part of it. It's not really there. So yeah, there we go, guys. That's who actually names all the roads in the UK, how a brief explanation of how they work as well. I hope you enjoyed that video. There's also systems as well that they use in places like the Isle of Man, the Channel Islands. There's all kinds of things like that. They all basically follow a similar system, but they are of course separate to Great Britain, and that is also the case for Northern Ireland as well, being separate from Great Britain. But I hope that was a decent explanation for you guys. Let us know, of course, if you have a topic suggestion for us to go through next on the motoringchronicle.com. I hope you enjoyed this one. Here on the Motoring Chronicle, we like going through some of the most popular questions on the internet that are being asked about the world of motoring, and one that I've seen recently, probably in response to a lot of concerning news coming out of the UK when it comes to our car manufacturing industry, is if the car manufacturing industry in the UK is in trouble, if it's at real danger of basically being wiped out. That's a lot of people. What's what a lot of people are asking at the end of the day. There's a lot of concerns when it comes to that, and they're not unfounded at the end of the day. There's a lot of troubling things going on right now in the UK, but I just want to dispel a rumor, a myth really, when it comes to industry in the UK, because I've said this on a number of occasions. People generally think that, the days of British manufacturing are over. We don't make anything in this country anymore. And that's just not true. We make a lot of stuff. And, there's an interesting graphic here from 2023 from the Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, SMMT, there we go. And that kind of goes over very much in terms of how much of an industry the car manufacturing industry is in the UK, because it's not just about British companies, British brands, but it's also a lot of foreign brands as well that do actually do a lot of their work in the UK when it comes to the European market. And I'll just explain what I mean by that just here now. So according to this, the SMMT's stats, the automotive-related manufacturing contributed around £93 billion of turnover in 2023 and £22 billion of value added to the UK economy as a whole. And they also invest around £4 billion each year in research and development, R&D, which just helps things in the long term, really. So it's a big research place when it comes to automotive innovations and technologies, is the United Kingdom. There's around almost 200,000 people that are involved in the manufacturing. And then in total, when it comes to automotive manufacturing as a whole, everybody to do with these car companies, you've got over 800,000 people. That is a huge percentage of the workforce. I'd wager that's one of the highest things in the UK. I think the highest is the NHS, the National Health Service, unsurprisingly. But when it comes to heavy industry, or at least in any kind of industry like that, the car sector is huge. And this is actually huge for jobs outside of London. A lot of people say there's too many jobs in London and not enough in the rest of the UK. But the automotive sector, for the most part, is actually based outside of London. There's some huge plants in the northeast, the northwest, the Midlands, South Wales, even up into Scotland and Northern Ireland as well. There's some huge sites. And when it comes to the overall exports, not just cars being made in the UK for UK buyers, but around 12% of total exports of goods from the UK actually come from the automotive sector, and those goes to around 140 countries in total. I will put this graphic on the screen while I'm talking about it, by the way, because it's really interesting and it does really shatter some of the misconceptions when it comes to the automotive sector, in my opinion. And in total, that's a trade of around £115 billion. And when it comes to the actual cars themselves, what's actually being made, there are around 25 manufacturers in the UK that have plants. Now, these are not only just British car brands such as Jaguar and Land Rover and Rolls-Royce and Bentley, but also a lot of foreign ones as well. A lot of German car manufacturers come here to do their stuff. Same with Japan as well. Of course, they drive on the left, so that does help things as well. And they account for around 70 car models in 2023. And it's not just that as well. It's also parts, components as well. 2,500 of those in the UK in total, which is massive, and some of the most skilled engineers in the world. It's no coincidence that for the Formula One teams, for the most part, 7 out of the 10 Formula One teams are based in the UK. It's not a coincidence. We're very good at manufacturing at the end of the day. Last year, there were 900,000 cars, 120,000 commercial vehicles, and in total over 1.6 million engines built in the United Kingdom. And 8 out of 10 cars produced in the UK is actually exported overseas. Again, massive in terms of generating cash from other parts of the world, really, just from exporting. So in terms of what was the case last year and what is mostly the case this year, the UK has a massive manufacturing sector when it comes to cars. But there is a caveat, and this is what I wanted to talk about, and this is why I wanted to talk about it. I've seen this question pop up a lot, but I didn't really want to go into it because I just thought, well, I'm just going to be going over the same stuff that everybody knows, really. Just saying, well, the myth is actually not true in terms of manufacturing. But there have been developments in the UK recently, and it's really come to a head. I mean, we've had, what is it now? We've had Nissan's plant down in Luton. They're on about closing. The next year, they're going to consolidate their resources further up north, and a lot of places are on about either downsizing or getting massive fines. And you know what I'm going to mention? It's the zero emissions vehicle mandate, the ZEV mandate. Now, again, just to go over what a lot of people should know. A lot of people are blaming the current government for this. It is not their fault. This is the fault of the previous government. This was regulations that was put in. So for those that don't know what the ZEV mandate is, I've explained this a lot, but I'll do so again for those that haven't watched my previous videos on it. Basically, zero emission vehicles, i.e. for the most part, electric vehicles, they have to make up a certain percentage of what manufacturers are making, whether it's regular passenger vehicles, regular cars, whether it's vans, whether it's trucks. There's all these regulations when it comes to how much a percentage of the cars that you're making are zero emission vehicles, ZEV vehicles. Now, unfortunately, because of a lot of different factors that I don't really want to get into because it'd take too long, the demand for electric vehicles right now in the UK is a lot less than what was forecast. And this is despite a lot of manufacturers actually putting unsustainable incentives upon their cars to the point where they're probably losing money on them. People cannot buy them fast enough to keep up with what was the forecasted mandate. Each year that we get closer to 2030, which is the net zero by that point? No, that's 2040 net zero. But in terms of actually not selling any more petrol and diesel cars, that can't happen after 2030 according to the regulations that were put in by the previous government. Now, of course, like I said, the demand for cars has not been as high as expected. So going forwards, the percentage that the manufacturers are actually making electric vehicles will not be as high as what was forecast. For not meeting those quotas, the car manufacturers actually get massive fines. I think it's something crazy like £12,000 per vehicle that they are under what they should be doing. So in terms of that, we are seeing some really nasty side effects of it. And of course, I'm sure some people will say, well, this is just car manufacturers being greedy. And maybe there's a bit of that for sure. But at the end of the day, if you're not producing an environment for these car manufacturers to go out and make cars and make money, and there's a better environment for them to do that in another country, they will leave. They will leave, especially if they are foreign car manufacturers, because that is what's in their interest. And it's fair enough, really, from their point of view. I see no problem with them doing that, but it's going to cost a lot of people a lot of jobs, and that is the real tragedy of all this. Forget the shareholders and all that. They're multi-millionaires for the most part. We don't care about them. Who we care about, though, are the people on the ground who are actually, they're working every day, 9 to 5, probably longer in a lot of cases, just to put food on the table. Those are the people that are suffering. And I'm sure some people say, well, they can just relocate. There's not going to be as many jobs. And even if they could relocate, some people can't. What if they've got a family? What if their partner or their wife or their husband or whatever has to get another job just to survive? They're not just going to up sticks and leave. It's not as simple for them. So in my opinion right now, the UK car manufacturers industry is actually in a bit of trouble, and it needs help from this current government to actually remedy it, basically, to change the forecast and change the regulations of this, because at the end of the day, extenuating circumstances from outside of the UK's control and possibly a bit of not the best kind of forecasting has conspired to mean that unfortunately these car manufacturers can't make enough electric vehicles, and they'll get fined and they'll lose a lot of money. And to actually make them is even worse in a sense, because they're just going to be sitting around, no one wants to buy them. So those regulations have to change. The current government can and should do something about it. Lower the amount of percentages for the actual EVs for these years, and don't fine the manufacturers, because if you do, then they will leave. This will happen. It's inevitable. Why wouldn't they? Why would they stay somewhere that is absolutely costing them millions in revenue from fines? It just doesn't make business sense, and they'll go. But that's my opinion, guys. Right now, the UK manufacturing industry, when it comes to cars, is in a very, very precarious position. It is at a crossroads. We either go deeper into this ZEV mandate, this electric vehicle kind of, obsession that we have at the moment, to the point where it's detrimental to the car industry as a whole, and it just goes into a really bad place at that point. Or we admit we've made a mistake, they happen, and just go back and say, you know what, let's lower these percentages, let's make them more realistic, and then go from there. That would be the sensible option, in my opinion. Will we do it? Who knows? But if we don't, the consequences could and probably will be disastrous. But that's my take on it, guys. That's my 10 minutes here on the motoringchronicle.com. So, are you driving home for Christmas this year? Well, I am in about a week or so. But in the meantime, let's have a look at what Volkswagen owners have revealed as their fast lanes to fast festive fun. Let's have a look at this, guys. Full article on the motoringchronicle.com as always. Get in the fast lane to festive fun this Christmas with the favourite motorways, scenery and rest stops of Volkswagen drivers. A survey of more than 3,000 VW owners has revealed their favourite places to drive just in time for the millions of festive road trips that take place across the UK every December. The M6 in Cumbria, with its Lake District backdrop and T-based services, top the list, followed by the M4 and M40, the latter being highlighted in particular for its fast and scenic routes through the Chilterns and Cherwell Valley. It runs for 89 miles between London and the Midlands, so anybody driving a luxurious VW ID7 Pro S could complete the entire journey almost 5 times before needing to stop for a charge, thanks to the car's impressive 436-mile range. That's pretty damn good, I must admit. The top 5 motorways in the UK on the survey were the M6, the M4, the M40, the M5 and the M1. Other favourite locations included the M62, taking in the famous Slot Hole Farm between each carriageway and the highest point of any motorway in England at 1,221 feet, 372 metres above sea level. Scotland's N74 and M8, as well as the M9, were all among the top 10, and there was lots of praise for Gloucester's farm shop services on the M5. VW electric cars offer plenty of range for anyone with long distance drives across the UK this Christmas. All of the brand's ID's cars, apart from a handful, are fitted with the smallest batteries, offer enough range based on the combined ULP calculations to complete journeys of 500 miles or more with just one stop to recharge. A total of over 3,000 VW owners took part in this survey, which conducted in November to find the insights into driving behaviours and preferences. Of those who took part in the survey, 58% were drivers of electric vehicles. Interesting stuff. So, yeah, not really a surprise for me personally that the M6 in Cumbria topped this list. That is a beautiful part of the world. I've only been on that part of the M6 a few times. I went on it getting back from Scotland, and it was fantastic scenery. Did it while going up to the Lake District a few times as well for climbing Scarfell Pike, which is a great mountain to climb. Don't do it this time of year, though. It would be very difficult. The M62, as much as I moan about the M62, in terms of scenery, going between Huddersfield and Manchester, which I do a lot, that's where my other half lives, in terms of scenery, it's absolutely stunning. It's just that most of the time it's absolutely clogged with traffic and insane drivers. But from a scenery point of view, it's pretty damn good. And yeah, the highest point of a motorway in England is that as well. Some bits of the M1 are pretty nice as well, going through the likes of the Sherwood Forest, the South Yorkshire Forest as well, if you're going in and around Sheffield again, which I do a lot. That's where I'm from originally. So yeah, some definite beautiful spots as well for there. I can't speak about some of the others because I don't really use them that much. But yeah, I can imagine have I gone on the M74 in Scotland? I feel like I have at some point. I've definitely been on one of the motorways up in Scotland, although which one I can't remember off the top of my head. But again, if it's in Scotland, it's probably nice scenery as well. So there we go, guys. Which is your favourite scenic route in the UK to take in the winter? Which motorway tops the list for you? For me personally, if I had to choose one, I'd have to agree. I'd probably say the M6 is the most beautiful motorway. That stretch of of it in Cumbria, followed probably by the M62 just in terms of pure scenery for that stretch over the Pennines. But yeah, I want to hear your thoughts in the comments below. So interesting headline here on the motoringchronicle.com. Break up for Christmas, don't break down. I don't think that's referring to your relationship, although who knows, maybe it is in this article. Let's find out what they're recommending here. Hopefully it's not recommending that. I don't want to break up for Christmas. I want to stay together. That's what family and friends are all about at the end of the day, Christmas time. But yeah, let's have a look at what's been said here, guys. Full article on the Motoring Chronicle, as always. Road Safety and Breakdown Organisation GM Motoring Assist says that basic vehicle checks will help you ensure you're not left stranded at the roadside in this year's big Christmas getaway. GEM lists a simple section of tips to help you ensure that you won't be breaking down this winter and needing help from them. Simple actions before you set off, such as checking there's fuel in your tank. I mean, who sets off with not enough fuel in your tank? Or at least not noticing that, you need to get to a petrol station stat. That's pretty basic. Air in your tyres, yep, that usually helps tyres. And can it help ensure that you keep moving according to GEM? Also, most battery failures and other electrical malfunctions can be prevented through routine checks and regular servicing. GEM Head of Road Safety James Luckhurst has said, don't wait for signs of car trouble before taking action, as it may be too late. Yes, around half of all people in the UK, or half of drivers in the UK, don't know what their actual warning lights on their car mean. So yeah, look that up. Look at the manual. Look online. Just don't ignore it. It's always a bad idea. We all know that roads will be busy over the holiday period, and if you can say that again, it's absolutely chocker everywhere right now where I live. And the last thing anyone needs is to be stranded at the roadside. GEM wants everyone to get where they want to go in safety with as little stress as possible. That's why a few minutes spent over the most basic vehicle checks can really provide dividends. If things go wrong, then a good breakdown recovery policy is vital, and it will cost less than a fee required for roadside help, especially on Christmas Day. We want everyone to have a safe and stress-free Christmas break. Basic maintenance checks minimize the risk of breakdowns and will make a big contribution to a happy holiday season for all the family. GEM's tips for stress-free Christmas journeys are as follows. Ensure that your car is serviced regularly. Our experts reckon that more than 50% of breakdowns would not have occurred if the car had been recently serviced. Be good to your battery. Cold weather puts an additional burden on your battery, so get it checked. Remember that batteries last an average of 5 years, so be ready to replace it if necessary. Check the pressure and tread on all your tyres, including the spare. There's no use changing it to your spare tyre if it's not up to scratch. Keep your screen wash topped up. Fill up your fuel before a journey, which should help save money by avoiding the need for a pricey fill up on the motorway. Never fill up on the motorway unless you have to. Those prices for petrol and diesel are ridiculous. Aim to refill when the gauge drops to 1/4 in case you get stuck in long traffic queues. Don't wait for the fuel warning light to come on. Check your route for possible delays before you set off and always have an alternative route planned. Finally, spread the cheer. No one likes sitting in traffic jams, but you can help diffuse any seasonal tensions by small acts of kindness, such as letting someone into the queue, which is always good, of course. Unfortunately, here in the UK, that is a very rare occurrence that someone lets you into the queue like that. It's definitely dog eat dog out there, especially this time of year, people getting their elbows out. But yeah, guys, there we go. Just some tips on how to prevent a breakdown before it happens. It's kind of self-explanatory. Make sure your car is roadworthy, especially before a long journey. I mean, if you're just popping down the road to see your family, that's fine. But if you're going to the other side of the country to do so, which a lot of people are, of course, probably best just to give your car a quick check, especially this time of year, and especially if the weather is cold and snowy as well, which I don't think it's forecast to be for the most part here in the UK this time of year for Christmas, but it's always possible. We had a lot of snow in November, remember, didn't we? So yeah, there we go, guys. Some helpful tips here on the motoringchronicle.com. Stay safe this holiday season. Thanks for all your support on these videos throughout the year. And of course, like, share, comment, subscribe, ring the bell as well. And we'll see you soon, guys. Merry Christmas.